I never thought the richest years of my life would begin with the poorest month I ever had. I am 68 years old, and I spent 31 long years driving a delivery truck across the state of Ohio before retiring on a pension and Social Security that together came to $1,800 a month. Property taxes took their bite before I ever touched the money. The grocery bill climbed every single week. The furnace clicked on, and I felt it in my chest like a hand closing. I was not poor on paper, but I was not alive in practice, and there is a special kind of tired that comes from standing on that line. Back in America, I counted every dollar twice and still came up short. Here, in a city my old friends could not find on a map, I finally stopped counting. So I sold nearly everything I owned and boarded a plane. What happened in my second month almost sent me home. Almost, let me back up, because I want you to understand that none of this was brave in the beginning. It started with insomnia. That last winter in Ohio, I kept waking at 2 a.m. to do arithmetic in the dark. $1,800 coming in. Property taxes on a paid-off house that cost me more every year than my first car did. Groceries that made me put things back on the shelf while pretending I had simply changed my mind about wanting them. One of those nights I picked up my phone, and somewhere in that endless river of videos, a man about my age appeared on a balcony in the Philippines holding a cup of coffee, saying he lived well on less than what I was barely getting by on. I did not believe him. I watched it twice anyway. Then I watched another one and another, night after night for nearly 2 months, the way you circle an idea you are afraid to admit you want. I told myself it was foolishness. I was a delivery driver, not an adventurer. In 31 years behind the wheel, I had memorized every county road in southern Ohio, and the farthest I had ever traveled was a fishing trip to Canada back in 1991. But that spring, the property tax notice arrived, and the number had climbed again, and I sat at my kitchen table with that envelope and understood something simple. Staying was not safe. Staying only felt safe. So I did the wildest thing a careful man can do. I made a list and I worked it. I sold my truck first, and I will not pretend that did not hurt, because a man who drove for a living loves his truck the way other men love their dogs. Then I sold the furniture, most of it in one long Saturday, watching strangers carry my recliner and my dining table out the door for pocket change. My neighbor asked me straight out if I had lost my mind. I told him no, I was finally trying to find it. 3 weeks later, I landed in Davao City with 2 suitcases and a folder of printed documents I had checked so many times the paper had gone soft at the corners. The airport doors slid open and the heat wrapped around me like a warm, wet towel, and I stood on that curb thinking, well, old man, you have really gone and done it now. A driver held a sign with my name spelled slightly wrong, and he smiled at me like we were already old friends. And on the ride into the city, I watched motorbikes weave through traffic and fruit stands blur past in every color I could name and a few I could not. Back in America, my evenings had shrunk down to a recliner, a television, and a thermostat I was afraid to touch. Here, on my very first night, I ate grilled fish by the water with strangers who talked to me like family, and the whole meal cost less than a sad drive-through hamburger back home. I rented a small condominium in a neighborhood called Matina. 1 bedroom, clean tile floors, a little balcony with room for exactly 1 chair, and the rent was $300 a month. $300. I paid the first month and half expected someone to knock on the door and tell me there had been a mistake. That first month was a honeymoon, plain and simple. I ate mangoes so sweet they made the ones back home taste like a rumor. I walked to the water in the mornings and watched fishing boats come in. I learned that people smiled at me first before I smiled at them, which took some getting used to for a man from Ohio. I ate out almost every day because I could. Little grilled chicken places and noodle stands where a full plate cost what a cup of gas station coffee used to. In the evenings, the whole neighborhood came outside, kids playing in the street, somebody always singing somewhere, old men playing chess on a folding table under a streetlight. And more than once they waved me over and let me lose gracefully. I had spent 31 years mostly alone in a truck cab, and suddenly I could not walk to the corner without 3 conversations. And I ran that air conditioning like it owed me money, all day and most of the night, because after a lifetime of scraping ice off a delivery truck at 5 in the morning, cold air on demand felt like the luxury I had earned. I remember calling my daughter and telling her I felt 20 years younger. I remember believing the hard part was over. Then the second electricity bill came. I opened that envelope, standing at the mailboxes in the lobby, and the number had doubled from the month before. Doubled in 1 month. I stood there and read it 3 times, and I felt the old cold come back into my hands, the same feeling as that kitchen table in Ohio with the property tax notice, because here is the truth about a man living on a fixed income. It is never really the number that scares you. It is the direction. If a bill can double once, it can double again, and that night night, I sat on my little balcony in the dark, doing the same arithmetic that used to keep me up at home, except now I was 8,000 miles from everything I knew, with no truck, no furniture, and an empty house sitting silent back in Ohio. Back in America, fear had been a slow leak I had learned to live with, a hiss in the background of every month. Here that night, it burst through all at once, and I asked myself out loud, alone in the dark, "What have you done, old man?" I even looked up the price of a one-way ticket home. I want to be honest about that because the videos I watched never mentioned this part. There is a moment for every one of us who makes this leap when paradise stops performing and hands you a bill. The next morning, I was standing at those same mailboxes, staring at the bill again like it might apologize, when my neighbor from down the hall stopped beside me. He was a retired school teacher, a few years older than me, small and quick with silver hair and reading glasses pushed up on his head. He looked at the paper in my hand, and then he looked at me, and he laughed, not unkindly. He said he could hear my air conditioning humming through the wall day and night, and he asked me gently if I thought I was living in the Philippines or just visiting it with my wallet open. He invited me in for coffee, strong and sweet, and we sat at his table while he explained what he called the local rhythm. He told me that no family in that building ran the air conditioning the way I did. He said the fan is your friend and the machine is for sleeping, an hour to cool the room and then let the night do the rest. He told me to open my windows in the early morning when the air is soft and close the curtains against the afternoon sun, like everyone else on the street had been doing their whole lives. And he told me that if I was buying my food where the tourists buy it, at the hours the tourists buy it, then I was paying tourist prices for a local life. And that was the most fixable problem a man ever had. 2 days later, my neighbor knocked on my door at 4:30 in the morning, and we walked through the dark to the public market while the city was still rubbing its eyes. I had never seen anything like it. Fish coming in so fresh they still smelled like the sea instead of like fish, laid out on beds of ice under bare bulbs. Pyramids of mangoes and pineapples and greens I could not name. Rice in open sacks you could run your hand through. Vendors calling out to him by name, and within 3 visits calling out to me too, the tall American who comes at dawn. He taught me to buy what the vendors' own families were buying, to shop with my eyes and not with a list, to let the price of the day decide the menu instead of the other way around. He showed me how the haggling was not really haggling at all, more like a short, friendly conversation with a price hiding inside it, and how a smile and 2 words of the local language got me further than any amount of pointing. We would finish before the sun was fully up and drink coffee at a plastic table while the market roared around us. And I swear that hour became my favorite hour of the week. I learned to cook again, simple things, rice and fish and vegetables with garlic, the way I had not cooked since my wife passed. And something happened in those weeks that I did not expect. The panic did not just shrink, it dissolved. Because panic, at least for me, was never really about money. It was about not understanding the machine I was living inside. Once he showed me how the machine worked, I stopped being a passenger in my own retirement and got back behind the wheel, which, for an old delivery driver, is the only place I ever felt at home. The next electricity bill told the whole story. With the fans doing the daytime work and the windows open to the morning air, the number fell right back down and stayed there, and I take that bill to my refrigerator like a diploma. I slept better under a fan than I ever had under that roaring machine anyway, and my body settled into the climate the way he promised it would. Give it 6 weeks, he said, and your blood learns the weather. He was right about that too. I sat down one evening with a notebook and built a real budget, not a hopeful one, a true one, and I have kept it honestly ever since. So let me do what most of these videos never do, and read you my actual numbers out loud. Every dollar of an ordinary month. My rent in Matina is $300, the same today as the day I moved in. Electricity, now that the fans do the daytime work and the air conditioning only runs while I sleep, comes to about $60, and water is another $10. Food from the market, shopping at dawn the way my neighbor taught me, runs me about $200 a month, and I eat better than I have in 20 years. I still eat out whenever I feel like it. Little restaurants and grilled chicken stands and a nicer dinner now and then, and that comes to about $100. Phone and internet together are $50. Getting around the city, rides and jeepneys and the occasional taxi in the rain, cost me about $40. I put $100 every month into an envelope for doctors and dentists, and the surprises a 68-year-old body likes to arrange. And most months that envelope just gets fatter. Odds and ends, a haircut, a shirt, a gift, laundry soap, call it 60. Add it all up and an ordinary month cost me a little over $900. Lived well, not lived carefully. Out of $1,800 a month, I saved close to half, for the first time in my adult life. I read those numbers to my daughter over a video call and she went quiet for a moment. And then she said, Dad, you sound different. She was right. I think about my old life more kindly now than I did when I left it. Ohio gave me my work, my family, and 31 years of roads I could drive blindfolded. But I know the difference now, and I will say it plainly. Back in America, I was a man in a chair, waiting for bills the way you wait for weather, letting a thermostat and a tax notice decide the size of my days. Here, I am a man who walks to a market at dawn, who knows his neighbors by name and is known by them, who saves money and spends mornings and wastes absolutely nothing that matters. The dollars are the smallest part of the story I have just told you. What I actually bought with that one-way ticket was the feeling I get at 4:30 in the morning, walking through the dark toward the smell of the sea with a friend beside me. Somewhere in my second year, I realized I could name the change in one sentence. I stopped surviving and started living. If you take anything from an old delivery driver's story, let it be this. Courage does not check your birth certificate, and a life worth waking up for has no age limit and no expiration date. If stories like mine, told straight and honest with real numbers, are what you came here for, I would be glad to have you subscribe and ride along for the next one, because it is never too late to stop paying for a life and start living one.